Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this recorded Zoom. We will send out the recording following the webinar today. And also, you can ask any questions in the chat. We do have a poll going, so if you want to go ahead and answer that. My name is Lindsay Marty. I'm the owner at Above the Bar Marketing. For those of you that aren't familiar with Above the Bar, we are a full service digital marketing company for law firms. We do everything from website design, social media marketing, SEO, pay-per-click, LSAs, everything you can think of for law firms. We also are rolling out our ATB Academy next month, which will be a resource for all law firms to help guide your practice, get your practice started wherever you're at in your practice. There's going to be a variety of different resources from some of our major legal tech stack partners. And there will be a section on AI. So if you want to rewatch that, this will be in the Academy along with a bunch of other resources. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Spencer Smith. Spencer consults for and invests in dozens of high-tech projects and teaches using simple language. His company, Amplify, has worked with legal industry clients since 2015. After starting his career at IBM during the Y2K days, Spencer has always been an early adopter of new technology, so he can better teach others what he's learned. He's a graduate of economics of digital assets program at the University of Pennsylvania. So welcome, Spencer. I'll turn things over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Lindsay. Thanks, everybody, for being here as well. And based on the poll, just getting the temperature check in the room, it's obvious that we don't have a bunch of novices. So obviously, you've explored the AI tools a little bit, specifically ChatGPT, and then a little bit of Google Bard as well. So the way we're going to structure this is I'm going to take you through a brief PowerPoint just to give some context as to where we are right now, and then really get into the tactical stuff. So what we see in the prompt engineering space, if we can call it that. I think we're all getting better and better at this stuff. And then also give you some takeaways as well by way of showing you in my browser what I've seen to be successful, especially with the paid for version of ChatGPT, so we can get some better answers. So the first part I'm going to share with you here is this PowerPoint that I playfully have called the Robo-Rob, the pixel art party of AI in legal services. And once again, this is just to get a gauge as to where we are as far as the industry goes, and then what we can anticipate moving forward. So considerations, we're going to go through the dangers that we perceive right now. If you're using this to either do research or to produce, and then just some personal predictions to give you an idea as to where we're going. Just to give you a little bit more context, I serve on the Wisconsin Technology Council Board of Directors, and this is a really, really big topic because we're building out a task force with the governor's office as well. So I guess what we've seen is I haven't really seen a technology catch fire quite like this one before, where it transcends any given industry, any given job role, et cetera. And I think legal and accounting and a few other professional services have been subjected to the polls where it says, hey, which one of these is going to be disrupted the most? And I know legal is always high on the list. So let's get some of these things out of the way first, and before we get into the more practical application. So a couple of the dangers that we see right now. This is every big firm, just like when we had social media launch, their first inclination was to say, hey, don't use this because we don't understand it. We don't know what the implications are. And it's putting up guardrails first, which I think makes a lot of sense. But the conversation is, in fact, being forced by a lot of factors at play right now, whether it's increased productivity from firms or organizations, as well as more and more players getting into this space, which I will get into in just a little bit. So contrasting to every big firm saying don't use it, we have every student out there saying only use it, right? Why would I ever write a paper again? Why would I ever do any research again? Why, when I sit for my LSAT, can I just not have the AI do it for me? So we got these two competing interests, right? Students are adopting at a very high rate, and then most big firms say don't use it. And I think for many of us that are in the middle of the pragmatists, this can help me focus on doing the most important things. Sign me up. Like I'm super interested in this, but I really need to know where I can play safely and where I shouldn't be doing these things. So there's maybe, if we separate these into two buckets, if you will, the first one is helping us do research. And research to me would mean anything that would be looking for inputs. So maybe if we just back up, when I was in high school, I really wanted to learn about stocks and investing in the stock market. And I went to the high school library knowing that there was a book about that. It was called Investing Smart from the Start. I went to check it out and it was already checked out by somebody else. And as of that point, I was out of luck, right? Like that was the one resource that I had. And it sounds kind of ridiculous to even say that these days because everything is ubiquitously free because of the internet, right? So whether it's in print, YouTube, all that kind of stuff. But I think what's happened is we have so much information all over the place now. It's really hard to figure out where to start, who to trust, and then what's the procedure by which we walk through something that we'd like to learn. So that's where I feel ChatGPT and other tools like this do such a wonderful job of helping make us smarter. Because I think of it as an infinitely patient tutor who will take any of your questions, respond with answers, and then you can say, that was good, that was not good, I need more clarification this way, teach it to me like I'm 5 years old, teach it to me like I'm a postgraduate, all of these options, right? And it never takes offense to it. So regardless of when you want to learn something, regardless of how you want to learn something, the AI is here to help you. And I think that's a really, really empowering thing for all of us that have an internet connection and the availability of this tool. The other part is I don't have an idea yet. And this is wonderful for ideation, right? So if we're tasked with something internally, or maybe we have a research project that we'd like to do, and we go, man, I really don't even know what questions to ask. That's a wonderful way to say, if you were me, ChatGPT or Google Bard or whomever, if you were me, where would you start with this? Said another way, you can say, if I ask you for prompts about a given topic, it will give you prompts, which then you can return back to the machine and it'll teach you something. So an example, I have a boat and the boat has an electrical issue. So it's just constantly draining the battery. I don't know where the issue is coming from. There's all kinds of stuff it could possibly be. So I asked ChatGPT, hey, I have this boat, I have this phantom power draw. Help me ask you how to figure out what the problem is. And it starts to teach me what to ask. And that's just a wonderful, again, iterative way to learn things. And then lastly, I'd like help brainstorming how to do something better. So if you've ever been in a brainstorming session with people, right, there's two factors at play. You get a bunch of people in a room, you go, all right, we're here to brainstorm ideas for solving XYZ problem, whatever this thing is. And there's, again, the two factors are people thinking in terms of, well, if I say this and it's not a good idea, I'm going to get shot down, right? So in the group of their peers, how is this going to make me look if I say something? So people are often perhaps reticent to say something if they don't feel like it's a really good idea. But then also you get people in all kinds of different forms, right? Some people just had their coffee. Some are coming off a really tough meeting. Some may just not be in the mood to do it. It's really hard to get everybody on the same page when it comes to doing stuff like this. So what I found to be extremely effective as well as efficient when it comes to the AI tools is you can ask it to help you brainstorm ideas. And instead of you asking it for specific, like, I want this result, it just gives you a bunch of results. And you can almost make decisions by negation, right? You say, not this one, not this one. This one's promising. Number 3, not this one, not this one. And again, it doesn't take any offense to it. And it'll just spit out as many ideas as you want. So I'm going to pause here real quick before I go on to the production part of it and just see if we have any questions in the chat. Lindsay, you see anything in there right now that we could potentially address? Okay. So please feel free.
No, not yet.
Okay, thank you. So please feel free, anybody who has questions, to bring those questions up if you'd like, and we can be sure that we highlight those during the talk. Okay, so moving on from research then to production, we think in terms of, all right, we already have something that we'd like to have ChatGPT or another tool help us do. How do we then move that into some kind of product? And in this case, I have inputs, but I really need outputs. Okay, so in this case, I don't need help brainstorming, but what I want is for you to help me derive something. So here's a bunch of ideas, here's a bulleted list, here's an article that I wrote, make sure that it's not in passive voice, check it for active voice, all kinds of stuff like that. So if we know that we can improve upon something by way of something we'd already like to know that we, or sorry, something that we already have to say, this is a wonderful way to do it. So said another way, I already have an idea. I know that I want to do a new marketing campaign for our firm, and I think there's a lot of possible directions that we can go. Give me some ideas when it comes to slogans, graphics, problems that we're trying to solve for, unique selling propositions, all of those things. And the last one is I'd like to help you do the things I do now. So take the stuff I do now and help me do it better. Help me do it more efficiently, help me do it in a way that perhaps I haven't seen before, I'm not aware of before. So this is a wonderful way to help you become both more efficient with your output, as well as have a partner with whom you can just riff on these ideas. So here are the predictions based on what we talked about so far. What I see as the dark horse in this race that's going to really bring all of this stuff to light is Microsoft. So I asked in the poll, has anyone here used Microsoft Copilot? And the fact that we've had 0 out of 13 say that tells me that none of you are working for the 20 Fortune 500 companies where Microsoft is rolling this out. So they started this a while back. And what Microsoft is going to be doing is when you get your next version of Windows as the operating system, it's going to have a plain language box, an NLP box, a natural language processing, where it's going to say, hey, just ask me to do anything. So instead of you going into settings and going, now I know dark mode's around here somewhere, or I know I can perhaps silence notifications for a while, you can go to this box and say, turn this into dark mode, silence notifications, help me scan this Word doc and find any of the examples of a reference to a specific company, et cetera. It's going to allow you to layer on a Copilot service on top of any of the Microsoft tools. And that's going to just be a $13 upgrade for anybody who has Office 365. So Microsoft's piloting this right now with GM, Chevron, a couple other really big companies. And once they get this figured out, once they get the wrinkles taken care of, then they will go mass market with it. And anybody who has an Office 365 subscription is going to be left with a decision. Either you pay $13 a month and you become that much more efficient, or you're left behind by everybody else. So once that rolls out, I think many of the firms that are out there that are perhaps reluctant to allow this right now will say, look, we already have a relationship with Microsoft. They're already part of our security stack. Like, we know exactly what to expect. And you just flip the switch and then you're off to the races. So that's what I expect there. The second one is that for students or others like us that want to learn more things, we're going to use what's called custom instructions. Said another way, as opposed to having to go back and forth with ChatGPT or other systems, we can say, here's who I am, here's how I'd like to be spoken to, here's how I'd like you to respond. So I want you to make a joke each time you respond. I want you to only speak in bullet points. I want you to throw out all extraneous language. It's really how you would like to be talked to is how the machine is going to talk back to you. So I see that as very promising. And then with legal, I see this as up only as far as a really wonderful way for you to become that much better at what it is that you do. So the more tedious stuff we can perhaps replace with a machine that can do the things that you perhaps don't want to do or feel like you could be better utilizing your time doing other things. So here is a should I use AI framework for you? And answered like a good torts student, right? In law school year one, I was put on the qualifier of probably, right? So in this case, would you be comfortable publishing something on your website or social media? Then it's probably okay to use ChatGPT or Google Bard or another tool, knowing that if this went out into public or somehow their servers released the information that you had been asking it, that it'd be okay. And the other construct would be, is this something you wouldn't want to be made public? I would say probably no, as of this point. So any of the confidential information that you discuss via phone or email or in person or anything like that with clients or any of the people that you work with that talk to clients, that kind of stuff is what we don't want to divulge to an AI system that's public right now. The private AI systems are coming and they'll be here before we know it, especially with Microsoft, so that this will get a little bit more muddy. But here's at least what I feel is a good construct so far for us to gauge. So that is it for the PowerPoint presentation so far. I'm going to pause here again and just see if there are any questions. Otherwise, I can go right into the Word doc that I prepared to show you some prompting ideas. Okay, nothing so far. All right, cool. So let's go into the prompting ideas here that I prepared. So what you'll see on your screen right now is what I delineated into both discover and then produce. So I'm going to go through each one of these individually, and then we'll talk through what this will actually look like in real life. So I'll bring up the systems and then show you how these AI tools can work. So from a discover standpoint, we looked at understand, streamline, predict, transform, and then practical tools. So if we looked at the respective prompts, any of these you can copy and paste. I'm going to make this Word doc available. By the way, if you want to put your email in the chat, I'm happy to send it over to you. So the prompt is explain the fundamental concepts of artificial intelligence and its importance in the legal sector. That's a way perhaps you can find some things out that you haven't explored before, or maybe open some doors in your mind, if you will, that you perhaps haven't opened. Second, streamlining would be list repetitive tasks in a legal firm that can be streamlined using AI. So again, this is very benign stuff, right? Nothing about this is, your practice, your clients, any of that stuff is just, hey, what could I be doing better? Number three, predict, describe how AI can be used to analyze and predict client behavior in the legal sector. So what's changing? What could be anticipated to happen in the future? How could things be altered in the future? Transform, provide examples of AI applications that can transform legal operations and client interactions. So again, ideation, how do we get better? How do we maybe take our existing processes and use first principles to better those things efficiency-wise? And then for practical tools, recommend AI platforms or tools specifically designed for legal pros. And then the second one would be provide recent developments in the AI application within the legal industry. So again, how do we see around corners before this stuff pops up? And generally speaking, when we think about Discover, what I feel like this does a really good job of doing is we all have our project list or our to-do list, but I think it's equally as important that we have a not doing list. And this does a really good job of saying, hey, here are all the considerations that we have out here right now. Let's at least put this on our not doing right now list, knowing that we've at least addressed them. So when a question inevitably comes up about, hey, have we thought about doing this? Yes, we have. It's on our not doing list. So this is a really great way to keep going as far as thanks, Lizzie, for sending that out in chat. To keep going as far as not stagnating in our practices. And then under the production, it's something as simple as editing and formatting. This is a really wonderful way to go into something like a ChatGPT and say, hey, take all of the company names and the proper names of people and bold all the names. So as I scan this, it's easier for me to find references to stuff. It'd be really arduous to do this in something like Word, but if you upload a writing sample to ChatGPT and say, hey, bold all the names, it's going to say, hey, cool, this is what I see as all the names. I bolded them for you. How would you like it outputted? You want it in a Word doc? Do you want it something in markdown language? Do you want it in just plain text? Really, whatever you want. Another prompt would be summarize the following contract for a non-legal audience. So you take something that you've received that's public, summarize it in layman's terms, right? Put it in bulleted points. Find stuff that I can make easier to understand. And then last one is rewrite the following paragraph in active voice. So I think many of us, struggle perhaps with that. I know I certainly do, writing in passive voice too often. So if I'm writing a blog post or something I'm going to put out there on social, I always have the machine check it to see which voice I'm writing in, and then make suggestions for changing to active voice. Research assistance would be finding the most recent case laws related to a specific topic, or provide an overview of specific legislation. Now, where this works really well is in the more contemporary systems. So ChatGPT, because it has a corpus of data that ends a few years ago, this isn't going to be as effective as finding recent law cases, or case law in this case, but specifically Google Bard would do a much better job, as would Bing or other tools like that actually can access the internet and pull that information. And document organization would be identify and list the main points on this legal brief. So, hey, read this for me, figure out what the salient topics are. And then second prompt could be categorize the following lists of cases based on their relevance to a specific case. So here's a list of cases of which we're aware. We're tying it back to a specific topic. Let me know in order what you think is most important. Something as simple as translation that used to be really difficult. Take this legal document, make it Spanish from an English base. That's super easy to do. Client communication, generate a summary of this legal update or an alert to send in a newsletter. So you take maybe some legal language that you're going to send out an alert, send it through the ChatGPT system or something similar, and it will give you the rendition that you can share in layman's terms with your clients. And then last two would be analyze the patterns in the case outcomes over the past 5 years from a data standpoint, as well as predict the legal trends for the upcoming year based on this data set. So again, this could be your what we call a swipe file, right, in marketing. So you can take this and use it as you see fit. We're happy to send that out afterward.
There was one question that came
Please.
through.
Yeah.
Are there states that prohibit lawyers from using AI in case prep? How do they identify suspected AI and what are the penalties?
Jim, not of which I'm aware right now. I don't know if any states have that unless they're filling it in a different context. You know, people using technology incorrectly or maybe having some unlicensed person do something, but I'm not aware of states that have gone so far as to specify the language. That's why I had mentioned right off the bat with the state of Wisconsin task force here, the governor's office is trying to figure out how to take all of these tools and apply recommendations to certain industries like legal, journalism, accounting, that kind of stuff. So I'm not aware of that right now, but I know that between some of the bigger players that are out there, like your Lexus and that kind of stuff, they're layering on these tools pretty quickly to do a lot of the work. So it wouldn't surprise me if they're the ones that are lobbying the respective states or the federal government to see what AI tools can be used for prep wise. That's a really good question. Thank you. Okay, so let's take this Word doc and then let's explore a little bit of what these things could look like in real life when it comes to ChatGPT. So you'll notice that I have just the 3.5 version up, but I also have the paid for version as well. And if you haven't gone to 4 and you find yourself to be a pretty heavy user, I highly recommend it. I don't have any skin in the game when it comes to OpenAI or their revenue model at all. But what I found is that when ChatGPT trends, right, when people tend to use it a lot, it gets throttled, meaning you perhaps can't even get on it if you choose to. And 4 allows you for $20 a month to basically have unlimited use. I shouldn't say unlimited, sorry, unrestricted use, but then you do have a cap of 50 messages every 3 hours. And it does have these other features here. Advanced data analysis allows you to upload files and then have it return files to you. So you can say, read this CSV file, find these pieces of information, analyze them, and spit them back out for me, as well as a bunch of plugins as well. And that could be reading PDFs. It could be using something like Canva to create graphics. There's just a lot of really cool stuff that they've launched here. But from a best practices standpoint, what I found, and we'll stick with the free version just for now, is if we were to think about a format through which to ask a question to engineer a prompt, we generally want to assign a role. You want to then say our question and then our desired output. Because what this helps do is the machine learns exactly what it is that you would like it to say in the way that you'd like it to say it. So let's say the role is you are an expert in industrial cleaning laws. I'm just making stuff up as it comes to me. So evidently I can't even spell industrial. Here we go. Okay, so what trends have transpired the past few years that might lead to a different future in these laws? Desired output, I'm going to just say, please return. I always say please, just in case the robots, get really smart and start to come after us and get mad at us for being rude to them. I say, please return these recommendations as bulleted points. Okay, so what it's doing here in this case is all right, a couple things. You can see that the language that it's using here, it's not treating us as if we didn't know anything, because we're saying you are an expert versus you are really well versed explaining this to a novice. So we're asking it in this case to say you're an expert. So tell us expert related things. Tell us what trends you see, and then return them as bulleted points. So what's really cool about this format is because we asked it to do something ultra specific, it's not confused as to what the question is. So I feel like if we're giving it a role, that's always the best way, at least to get the higher quality outputs that we want from the machine based on what we're asking it. I see in the chat, is ChatGPT 4 more current than 3.5? I would say yes and no. And what I mean by more current is the body of data, right? The corpus of data is much, much more robust. So it's pulling from a lot more sources. And that's why we're going to get a higher quality return, usually as far as the question goes. So let's, just to your point, let's take this, Richard, and then open this in a new instance. And then what we'll do is we'll run the same prompt. through 4. And see our response. It's going to be quite a bit slower first because it takes a longer time. Okay, so what you're seeing right off the bat, right, is it's much more deliberate with its formatting. And what this allows us to do is then based on each respective topic, so green cleaning, tech integration, where it's returning better contextual content based on what an expert would say, you know, in which area are we playing here? And you'll also notice, and I know this is happening pretty quickly, but it has these kind of kitschy things like, and believe me, it's because I have a set of custom instructions running on ChatGPT to write the way that I write, which tends to not be super serious. It uses you and I and kind of makes jokes and sometimes uses one word paragraphs. So this is a much more robust return of the information versus something that would be kind of vanilla like this. So 4 versus 3.5, I find to be much more robust with its responses. So thank you for that question. It's really good. Oh, Lindsay, you're on mute. Sorry.
There's another question that came through from Heather. I'm hearing AI hasn't been updated since 2021. Is this a rumor or fact? How can we tell if our AI app platform is updated?
Yeah, good question. Couple different ways. So if we go to new chat here on ChatGPT, you'll see right at the bottom that which says, here's the version number, and it'll say when it was last updated. So if we go through here, I'm trying to remember what the exact date was. It's something 2021. So she's definitely right about that. This is more of a like the updates to the code, but you can also ask the machine itself. Slightly way. There we go, January 22. But you contrast ChatGPT, which again is just a large language model that's taking your inputs and using a dead set of data, if you will, right? Something that hasn't evolved. That is much more different now with Bard. So you could ask Bard here. I'll just go here for a second. So if I go to Bard, I could say, what was the last Packard score? And it's actually searching the internet in this case. So it knows that. ChatGPT would have told us that it didn't know what that was. And as long as we're on Bard, what I found to be extremely effective when it comes to Bard is if you think about any time when you've struggled to go out to the internet and say, I know that there's information about this thing somewhere, but I simply can't find it. This is a way where it will actually custom return the set of data that you want versus going to a bunch of disparate websites. It'll just say exactly what it is. So as an example, like I ran this query the other day, please create a table comparing the cost of buying a car in Illinois to one in Minnesota. It will be a cash purchase, and it returns all of this information here. So this doesn't exist anywhere on a website, but it took all the information from various websites and then took it down to a summary. And so anything that you say, I'd like information that's contemporary, that's located on the internet, that's up to date, that's out there in some capacity, but I would like it returned to me in a better way. This could be a wonderful way to do that. And I'm really glad we're doing this today because this has been rumored for a while, but they finally launched it. Is Google on their extensions now allow you to crawl each of these respective services of theirs proactively. So as we had alluded to, you can say something like, I want to find something nearby me, and it's going to use Google Maps and just layer on Bard as a natural language processing unit on top of Maps. So you can then ask it better questions a little bit more interestingly. So like, show me that, so this filled in this as an example, show me the grocery stores close to the entrance of Grand Teton National Park, and then give me some snack ideas. So as opposed to you going to Google Maps, finding Grand Teton, zooming in, trying to find the grocery stores or saying, find grocery stores near here. It's actually pulling from maps right now and going, here's exactly the answer to your question. So it's a huge increase in efficiency as far as I'm concerned.
There's another question in the chat.
Go ahead, Lindsay, please.
The biggest legal issue I have heard of is when attorneys don't cite to the chat GPT product they use in their legal documents, which may be plagiarism.
Yeah.
That's made up.
And I think that that's prevalent across the board, right? So whether we're using an AI-based system or not, like if we're using some kind of site checking tool and it said, hey, by the way, this was actually overridden or thrown out, that's I think going to happen both ways. So, but I definitely understand where you're coming from as far as this could be plagiarism. It could just be flat out wrongly checking something. So I feel like site checking is not something we're at with this stuff yet. As far as if I am going to put my name on a brief, I need to make sure I site check it first.
Mm-hmm. And then another question, where do you suggest starting to use AI in a small law firm?
I think based on the Word doc that I put together before, I would ask it questions about your model right now. So we're relying on, like it's say your plaintiff side, we're relying on questions to come in about people that have been in issues where they need our help, and ask it for ways to better do that from a marketing standpoint, from an intake standpoint, from a vetting standpoint. It's going to give you some ideas, especially if you give it some context. So let's just make that up. So I won't ask you specifically about your firm, but perhaps where I would start in this case is I would do something like I'm running a PI firm, focus on car accidents. Spelled today, sorry. Of course, I want to preface this, right? Again, if we think about the format that we talked about, you're an expert in personal injury. Say, turn this information to a table, just to give you a different take as to what this might look like. So I would perhaps at a small firm, I would think in terms of first going industry specific, asking for some help brainstorming, going through these, go, hey, that's pretty good, or all of these are nonsense or whatever. But then as you find stuff that you feel is pretty good, again, making decisions by negation, right? If I go, what would be some community safety events, right? So let's just grab the first one here. It has a description, it has a personal insight. But then if I say something like expand this strategy, oops, sorry, sure, copy that right. So, so this way, it'll give you perhaps a better roadmap if you'd like to execute on stuff like this. And again, what I'm showing you right now is ChatGPT 4, and that's probably why we're getting this kind of formatting versus something that would be much more generic. If there's any specific topics that people want to cover, as far as if you want to throw out an idea and say, which resource should we use for this, ChatGPT, Bard, something else in the future, I'm happy to cover that stuff if any of those questions might arise for you.
There's another question. Where do you think, oh, no, that's the same one, sorry. Never mind.
And then so if it helps, and please enter any more questions that you might have. I'm happy to answer them. What we found with Bard, specifically with Google, is Google ran into something what's called the innovator's dilemma. Maybe the best way I can frame this idea, this concept, is what happened with Blockbuster, and you contrast it with what happened with Netflix. So Blockbuster, obviously a huge company where we go and get our videos. They saw this little upstart Netflix come in and start doing DVDs by mail. And actually Blockbuster had an opportunity to buy Netflix very early on, but they chose not to. And Netflix knew that as streaming was coming, that they needed to set up a system where in lieu of sending out DVDs, they could start actively streaming. And the innovator's dilemma then in this context is, if I'm Netflix, I know that I'm knowingly putting myself out of business based on my current model by shifting to this other model. So I'm essentially saying, I know that this thing, if we do this really well, the streaming thing really well, it's going to put our old company out of business. And that's exactly what happened. And in turn, they put Blockbuster out of business. So old Netflix went away. Now new Netflix is here for us. So what happened with Google is they've been working on this stuff, as you can imagine, forever, because they have so much information. And they didn't want to come to public with this natural language style ChatGPT stuff because they feared it would affect their reputation negatively, because these AI tools, it's called hallucinations, right? It'll just make stuff up or cite the wrong case or whatever it might be. And Google didn't want to put its reputation on the line, even if it was in beta as a label right here, right? It says experiment right now. They knew that if they brought it to the market and people started using Google and it returned a bunch of hallucinations, that people would go somewhere else. But what happened in November of last year when ChatGPT launched is OpenAI effectively forced Google's hand, and then Google launched Bard with all of these caveats, right? Like, it's an experiment. We don't know what's going to happen. Don't trust it. Ask Google itself to see if you can get a better result. But that's forcing a lot of these companies now that were working on it in stealth to now come to public because they're continuously losing market share to ChatGPT. So I guess it's to our benefit that they've released it, because it is a pretty cool tool, especially if it's comes to the contemporary stuff that you'd like to access. But this is at least in its current form, something we can utilize somewhat effectively, even though it's going to hallucinate quite a bit for us. Other thoughts or questions from the audience? I'm not seeing any right now. How about you, Lindsay?
I am not seeing any additional questions either. So following the webinar, we will be sending out the materials for you. If you have any additional questions about anything, please feel free to reach out to us. We'll make sure that we get anything answered for you that we can. And thank you so much, Spencer, for joining us today. This was a great learning experience for me, and I think it will be really helpful for our clients as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you, everybody.